We're going to call this special. All right, Aaron. Aaron and I are still in shock over last night. All right, we're going to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. It's a budget meeting. It started at 5:04. Why don't we rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we get a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Ms. Tatum, second. Ms. Francis. All those in favor? 7-0. I want to thank everybody for coming early. It's the first night of Hanukkah. It also happened to have been a conflict where there were middle school concerts tonight, but those were actually moved to Thursday, so here. All right, first order of business is the public hearing. I think we have a speaker list out in the hall. Very high tech. We have 6 speakers signed up. The first is Brian Peldinas, after that Carol Sutton.
I will start with those magic words. I will be brief. I sent each board member an email supporting the Greenwich High School Honors Science Research Appropriation, so I will not repeat myself. I would like to thank the participants of that program and Mr. Bravante for visiting the Riverside Math Club for Girls Only over the last couple of years. I will add one point for your consideration. Several parents and real estate people with whom I've spoken over the last few months have mentioned that the program by itself is a factor for either people moving to Greenwich or remaining at the high school or returning from private schools. So this program has a significant impact, from what I've heard, in our retention and the work at the high school. So thank you. I told you I'd be brief.
Thank you. Carol Sutton, followed by patent holder Ethan Novak.
I'll be brief too, because I never have to adhere to 3 minutes, so tell me when I should go. Okay. Good evening, everybody. In this season of gratitude, I want to thank everyone who has been a part of this budget process for all the hard work. Except for Ms. O'Donnell, crunching numbers probably isn't your favorite part of being in education. GEA is especially appreciative that Dr. Gilday and her team included Exhibit A in the budget proposal and presented it as a needs list, not a wish list, or a note to Santa or something like that. The team did its homework, and the association hopes the board will trust the work and include all 3 tiers of those asks in their final ask. But if choices have to be made, here are we have top 3, chosen because they have broad impact on teaching and learning. Number 1 is assistant deans. Outside the security staff and Officer Franco, these individuals are truly first responders when it comes to the achievement and well-being of our GHS students. Beyond their role in special education that was highlighted in the question and answers, they have brought back a consistency and discipline and are building a community that we can be proud of at Greenwich High School. We also, I know you know I'm going to say this, we would like you to support a coordinator for physical education and wellness. Again, these are the only required subjects that do not have an administrator to oversee the staff, the curriculum, etc., and the facilities. Every student in Greenwich is involved in these subjects. It is an entire plank of the strategic plan, and we've said a lot about that over the years. Third, we're very happy to see in Tier 1 classroom tech replacement program. Regardless of the trend to personalized learning and one-to-one devices, you'll be told that there is no such thing as full class presentations anymore, and that's simply not true. Smartboards are still an essential learning tool in our classrooms, and I get calls about them, and I just think that's an amazing thing for you to support. Under deferred, we were disappointed to see summer school redesign. Greenwich Public Schools Summer School currently touches over 1,300 students from across the spectrum of learner profiles. GEA supports any and all efforts to get the board and the administration on the same page when it comes to summer school. There was a lot of discussion last year, and it seemed like it went round and round, and we'd like to get that squared away. So for every top 3, there's usually a bottom 3. Instead, I just want to highlight a couple things that we found were missing. And it may be too late to put these in, but certainly some questions might be raised, perhaps for next year. If they were there, we missed them. So during the last budget meeting, Ms. Ford stated that the number of what some call paraprofessionals, but we call ESPs, or Education Support Professionals, has been constant for 20 years. And I don't know how that can be. So the first thing we did was go back and listen again to the tape and then verify that that is indeed true. But in the past 20 years, or maybe 25 years, ISD and Parkway reopened. The pre-K program was launched and has grown steadily, including one new section this year. The scope of special education law has expanded. The number of our students with identified needs has increased. Our regular students are coming to us with more and more social, emotional, psychological, and behavioral needs starting in kindergarten. And the number of FTEs, that's GEA, has increased from about 600 to 850 that it is today. How is it possible that the number of ESPs, or paraprofessionals, has been the same for 20 years, while our system has changed so drastically? An increase in the budget for ESPs is certainly missing from this proposal. And remember that contact with adults is important, not just for special education students. Another missing item is an increase in the number of social workers at the elementary level. If the data supports that our students are coming to school with greater needs, as it does, often stemming from poverty and unstable homes, how is it okay that one social worker services 11 elementary schools? There is one that's by grant for 2 schools, but the elementary schools represent 45% of our students and their families. This doesn't add up in any way but fiscally. And I get the head count. It's penny wise, pound foolish. And finally, though perhaps this is a topic for another meeting, a third missing is any indication of an on-the-ground commitment to building school and career opportunities for our students who aspire to the skilled trades beyond coding and business, whatever that is. No matter what happens to the jobs of the future, there will always be a need for HVAC engineers, plumbers, electricians, auto technicians, food service, so on and so on. We are so far behind in this area. I would say we have some things on paper, but it's mostly lip service. And again, that may not be for this budget, but it's something that everyone has to think about. And the reason this is so on my mind is I ran into a kid the other day who gave us a run for our money when we were here. Every 2 steps he took forward, we put him forward, he took 3 back. I ran into him the other day, he's 25 years old, he's a member of the union, he is an apprenticed for HVAC, driving a van, respected, has a child, and we can be really proud of him today. And I wonder whether some of that expenditure of energy and resources could have been saved and gotten him on a better path earlier if he had some opportunity to not, and no offense to anybody, be writing sonnets and or whatever all day long at Greenwich High School. So thank you very much. You have a hard job. Good luck.
Thanks, Carol. Ethan Novak, followed by Sophia Chow.
Thank you, Honorable Board and Superintendent Gildea. I'm Ethan Novak. I'm the founder and CEO of Innovator Energy. The most successful vocational training program at Greenwich High School is the Honors Science Research Program. Currently, funding for materials and equipment in the Honors Science Research Program for students to perform this research is only funded by parents and actually Mr. Bramante himself. Science research without materials is like expecting to train someone to become the best auto mechanic without letting them touch a car. So they go hand in hand. As we encourage students to pursue careers in science, technology, and engineering, we need to recognize that learning science from a textbook is only a subset of what is required to be a successful engineer or scientist. Ms. Bramante's Honors Science Research course fundamentally develops these essential skills, including problem solving, independent thinking, even experiencing grit on another level, because you have to do these research projects and you have to be judged and you have to go through the challenges that go through science research. In addition to developing these skills in over 50 students each year who take the course, honors science research really is a really influential program. If you look at the Innovation Lab, which has come out recently, robotics courses, science research courses in the middle school, I know plenty of people who were inspired to go into STEM and they weren't even in the research program, they were just inspired by the things we were doing in the research program. So it really has quite a large influence on the entire school district that I hope that, I think everyone here is aware of. And so in addition to that, the students of the Honor Science Research Program do develop PhD level research. There was a recent article in Quartz that came out that really talked about this and how not only that, but the actual equipment and materials, despite getting no funding right now, are at a level of a PhD facility. And that should sustain. We should continue to make that happen. So the students, in addition to that, it's really important that we look at Mr. Ramonti's job as not as a fundraiser. I know he, for the last over a decade since he's been a teacher, he has to spend time fundraising for these materials. And it's really, if you look at the sum of money, not a very significant amount compared to the work that's being done. I've been in PhD level labs at Yale and other places and the Southwest Research Institute, and things cost quite a bit more money to do the most simple tasks. And it's amazing what we can get done in the Honor Science Research Program with very little funding. And we're not paying the students to do the research, which other labs have to do. These student researchers are really developing breakthrough systems, breakthrough technologies, and they're doing it at a high school, and it's Greenwich High School, so we should be really proud of that. Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Ethan. The Quartz article is required reading for both of my sons, and we appreciate the fact that you're still cheerleading for the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sophia Chow, followed by Orlando.
Thank you, members of the Board of Education, for the opportunity to speak with you here today regarding the financing of what I and feel is the flagship program at Greenwich High School, Honors Independent Science Research. My name is Sophia Chow, and I am a senior at GHS who has been in the program for 3 years. I'm here this evening to support the inclusion of financial backing of this program, which has been non-existent for the 3 years that I have been in the class and the 12 years that Mr. Ramonti has taught the class. Many of you are aware of the tremendous pride and recognition that this class has brought, not only to Greenwich High School, but to the community as a whole. Science research has produced Google Science Fair winners, many Intel ISEF winners, JSHS winners, countless regional science talent fair winners, iSweep winners, Davidson Fellowship winners, and this list goes on and on. In the 12 years that Mr. Ramonti has taught the course, students have won more than $200K in prizes and scholarships that have made significant impact on our society's problems. In the 3 years that I have been in the course, I have witnessed innovation. Some include a rapid Ebola detection device, a tool to predict the future onset of one of the most deadliest cancers, development of a new treatment for Lyme disease, innovation in cancer using honeybee venom, and peer-reviewed publication by a GHS student. Here we are to debate and discuss whether the Board of Education might support this amazing class and the financial backing that amounts to less than 0.003% of the Board of Education's operational budget. I applaud our superintendent, Ms. Jill Gilday, for including this request in our new budget, as it represents the very first time that our district administration has recognized the glaring need for support for a remarkable class. This class platform for our students become young adults and can positively impact our society. You may be wondering what I've learned in the 2 years in the class. I've had the tremendous opportunity of working with a life-changing teacher who has taught me to dream, innovate, and imagine that I can make a difference and lend my unique talents towards seeking solutions to the most gripping problems that our society has to offer. In the class, Mr. Ramonti has taught me to take chances without fear of failure, as these failures lead to new ideas, new directions, and new ways of thinking. He has taught me to use my own creativity to push research in new directions so I could later articulate my ideas to researchers and scientists who are much more educated than I. he in this class has taught me to be a team player, to rely on others, and similarly support others to bring about change. This class has taught me to be a responsible young adult, treating others with respect and dignity. Yet here we are to debate whether this class should receive your support. Research is not inexpensive. Through the goodwill of Mr. Bermonti's previous support colleagues, he has been able to fill the lab with more than 200K in instrumentation. I urge you to send the appropriate message to our community, support science research and all that embodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. All right, next up, Romano Orlando, followed by Sopacora.
Hello, everyone. My name is Romano Orlando. I'm a senior at Greenwich High School, and like Ethan and Sophia, we're all here to support our beloved class, Honor Science Research. First off, I do want to thank you guys for allowing us to come here tonight, as it does feel good to have a legitimate voice as a 17-year-old kid in budget matters. If I were to ask you guys, what is the point of education, what would you say? As a 17-year-old kid, why am I in school? One answer, the most obvious, is to gain knowledge in the basic realms of school: English, writing, math, science. In this science research class, I am constantly reading science journals, so reading's covered, writing abstracts, so writing's covered, conducting calculations, it's math every day, and carrying out experiments, so this class encompasses all aspects of education. Another reason I'm at GHS from 8:30 to 3:15 might be to develop creativity. In case you don't know, my job when I first walk into my science research class at the beginning of the year is, what world problem can I solve? Literally. And I think it would be tough to inspire more creative thinking than that. Maybe education is about building character, which is easy in this class since the day-to-day schedule is 100% mandated by me and my motivation to work. Education could be about working with others, which is paramount in this class, since we are constantly reaching out to researchers, or maybe education is about helping students to eventually make the world a better place, which is what I do when I come to this class every day. There is no other class in Greenwich High School that envelops all realms of education like room 932 does, which is where the Honor Science Research class is held. We need to foster this class. A lot of people talk about STEM initiatives in the high school and inquire about different ways that we can create the next generation of scientists and prepare kids for future careers in STEM. Do you not see that this class, Honor Science Research, is that exact STEM initiative that the Board of Education so desperately wants? It's right here. We need to give this class the proper funding it needs. This class is everything education seeks to achieve, makes GHS look fantastic through its success, brings in literal cash for the school, is led by a fantastic teacher, is so inspiring, and is so much fun that I think if you really step back and look at this class, it becomes obvious that we need to figure out how to support it, not limit it. We don't want this class to only be for students who have parents who can write a big check. We want this program to be for everyone who yearns for education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the comments from the students. Greg, you can encourage students to come and participate in board meetings. All right, our last speaker signed up is Silva Cora.
Hi, Dr. Gillet, Peter, and the board. I was on the road all day today. I didn't prepare for this, but I need to know what we're going to be doing with the field at Hamilton Avenue School. We waited 10 years. It's 10 years now. We're looking to see if it's either in the budget or is there an interim appropriation that you're going to use. We need an answer. As far as I'm concerned, the plan that was shown to us is not proper. A gentleman came into our district many years ago and took down all the chain link fences because it said it looked like a prison, he said. He drove down in his Rolls Royce. And here we got a plan that was put together by I don't know who, but chain link fences supposed to go back up. No way. You have people in the community that are willing to help, that know how to fix this field. Please, do something about it this year. We need your help. And we heard a lot about it before the election. Heard nothing about it since. Please get back to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pecora. All right, that's it for signed up speakers. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board on an agenda or a non-agenda item? Ms. Large?
I think it's worth it for you to say that the board should be listening to the superintendent and what she said, that the operating budget is not what Dr. Gilday would really like to propose. However, 25 requests that did not make it into the budget are reasonable ones. They are items that are needed and or will move the needle, but it takes an investment. For too long, the mindset has been about a number, a guideline, rather than what the top educational professional in town sees unnecessary for her, in her professional opinion. The return on investment in our children is not a quantitative balance sheet number, and the budget proposed by the superintendent shouldn't be viewed as a two-dimensional piece of paper. The children of this town only have one opportunity to go through our school system. By not standing up for what is right and bending to the will of others, we are doing them and our future a disservice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Large. Anybody else wish to address the board? All right, with that, we'll close the public hearing portion and move on to number 3 on our agenda, budget reports. And note we have these in A, B, and C. I have a feeling the conversation is going to move around a little bit. But the first item, Dr. Gilday, would be the 2018-2019 budget Q&A round 2.
Okay, it may work. There we go. So we had questions submitted, we had responses returned to all of you. So if there are any additional clarifications or questions, we're happy to handle those at this time.
Ms. Dayton?
I had asked a question about renting fields for the use of our fall athletes, and I know the answer was that we'll find it in the budget, and doesn't give me a lot of comfort to know that other things could come in the way. It doesn't give me comfort not to know the total figure that would be a reasonable estimate covering the whole academic year. So I would love to just ask it again and to find the total dollar value of renting fields in the event that for some reason we can't go to Central, we can't go to Coscob Park, and we're forced to use out-of-town facility.
It's not only the rental fee we'd be looking at, but also probably a separate indemnification and insurance policy. So we will try to get you that information. We have Gus actually looking into where that might be for a field location that we could have consistently. And then once we have a location, then we can look at that pricing and what that policy may cost, and if town of Greenwich will permit it as well.
Just to follow up on that, would that include transportation?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Francis?
So I had heard Ms. Dayton a couple times say that we weren't really fully using the budget that we were allowed to, and I didn't quite understand that, so I went and dug up a bunch of different things, and I asked Ms. O'Donnell first because I thought it might be stupid, but it sounds like we may have money here that we didn't include or that wasn't in there. And so I kind of wanted to bring it up and have us think about that and how we may want to approach it. And I didn't completely understand that answer, but I think I got the bottom line. So if you look at the BET Exhibit 1 from October 23rd of 2017, it basically, as far as I can say, tells us that we have $160,102,794 that we can put in our budget for next year, which I calculated to be $412,000 and some change more than what we actually have in here. So I would like us to use that money, and I understand that maybe it wasn't quite divided up the way they suggested in terms of personnel versus other stuff, but I'm not sure I care because they gave us that amount of money and I think I'd like to use it. So I would like to know if anybody else on the board doesn't think that's a good idea, or if there's other questions to better understand that.
Yeah, I think we can pretty much assume Dr. Gilday will be trying to use every penny available to us, including where she finds them at couch at Havemeyer. But I do want to make sure that we are aligned with the BET and the town in terms of what we're using for base numbers, so that when we come to a percentage increase, that we're looking at it the same way that they'd be looking at it. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I did ask a question about the Hamilton Avenue field, and I understand that sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once because I had it open in front of me. The money that is allocated in the budget, the $260,000 for exterior improvements, relates to courtyard work at Ham Ave. So that means we're back to zero in terms of trying to put money into this year's capital budget. So can you tell me, do we have a plan? If we don't have a plan, when might we have a plan, and what do we anticipate that cost to be?
All right, go look to Lori and Dan to see what they've planned or if they have a response to that. But our thought was it was going to be an interim appropriation. So we would obviously need the MI application through the board, the approval for that once we have the site plan, and then it will just go forward from there. But our initial thought was an interim appropriation was our plan.
Yes, do we have a sense of timing? Because obviously we're working through this budget for 2018-19. This is going to go to the RTM for their May meeting, right? And there's a number of steps. So at what point do we anticipate going for an interim appropriation and having a plan in place for this board to look at?
Dan, do you have an answer? Do you want me to hazard a guess? Yeah. I hazard a guess that as soon as we can get the proposal prepared, it will come to you first, the board, for an MI approval. It then goes through the planning and zoning process, has to then go to BET for interim appropriation request. Then goes, I believe, to, I don't know if that goes to RTM or not, but I'll assume it does. And then it would get worked on as soon as school's out.
So for this summer, basically, for this summer of 18?
That is the plan.
Okay. Ms. Dayton?
But I may have the process wrong. I'm still learning.
I have follow-up comments and questions on that. And I know many of our staff are new, so I am relying on my memory. We had a high bid. We had a low bid. This is last academic year, okay? The low bid was not acceptable to the Board of Education. The majority of the board voted for the high bid. The high bid was turned down by the BET. We then asked for a third proposal that would be in between the low bid and the high bid. I believe we have that somewhere. I know we have a dollar figure that fits in between the two, so that's good. That leads me to believe that some of the planning is underway. My question is, what is the fastest route to putting shovels in the ground? Is it interim, or is it putting it in the budget? I want to do whatever is the quickest way to make the field usable for the children. So I'm happy to swap it. It doesn't matter to me. The second thing is, I originally proposed an interim for this project last academic year only because at that time, it would have speeded it up significantly, but now I'm open to other suggestions.
All right, again, I'm new, so I don't want to speak out of school, but I believe your same approach is the correct one. I believe if we go for an interim, that will be our fastest way to move that forward. I do not anticipate any problem through planning and zoning with it. I think it's a known need, so I think it's just a question of getting the financing, the money for it. If the board wishes to reassign or realign the budget, that's certainly up to you as well as we go through this process. That's fine.
Are you on the same topic? Okay, go for it.
So like Jennifer, going from memory, I thought that there might be some money left over from the building being built, and since the issue with the field was caused by the new building, where did that leave off? Does anybody recall?
So I think we were told that there was over $100,000 left over, but I think maybe we need to verify that with the town because sometimes these things become urban legend. but we should find out what that dollar figure is and how it could be used. Other questions? Ms. O'Neill?
Well, it's not really a question, although it probably is, in the fact that it's hard to believe, and maybe someone can confirm this, that there at the high school, the funding for science allows for $5 per student. It's kind of hard to rectify that with that idea, and so well presented by the students, of the fact that we're trying to encourage STEM. We have all these advanced courses at the high school, so it seems to me that it's sort of a no-brainer to approve the $20,000 for the science program there. And this only, hopefully, to be seed money to continue to grow this program, because there are a lot of students who could benefit from that program, and its popularity is growing. And another item I'd like to propose that goes along with that whole idea is the .2 math person for the advanced math students at middle school. That is another no-brainer because it actually saves money from using the Johns Hopkins online program. So I would like to highly recommend that those two items be placed in the budget.
Just to clarify that dollar figure for the science, I think in the document that we're going to come to in our operating budget, it shows it as $10,125. Are you proposing that it be increased?
Yes, absolutely needs to be.
I actually agree with that as well. You said 20,000?
We could raise it.
Ms. Holton?
I also was, I'm blown away by the innovation and creativity of these high school students, and believe that the science research program is amazing, and don't want money to be in the way of holding them back from what they're creating, which is mind-blowing. I would also be in favor of funding the science research.
I had a son in the program who's now in university. I think it's a wonderful program. At that time, parents must have been a lot more generous than they are this year. So if there is a deficit in getting equipment for that program, I think we should include it in the budget.
All right. Is there any other topic? Ms. Stein?
Are we going back to questions? Yeah. Okay, just want to make sure. Sorry about my voice. I've been talking a lot. Obviously not here yet, but Lori, thank you so much for this. There was a lot of detail on this, and I imagine all of the cabinet participated in helping with the answers. But the question I have for you is about the buses, and I'm sorry to be sort of slow on this, but obviously the money for the 3 additional buses is now was included in the base budget, is what we understand. And that means that this $252,000 was not something we had to add as additional. And it's simply an increase then year over year of $177,000. I'm just trying to, I guess, figure out the differential, and maybe it's just because it's a particular route or something like that, but one was $250,000 for 3 buses, and this one's $177,000 for 3 buses. And so I'm just trying to understand, is it maybe, is it in the contract, is it a different route? Is this the right optimization of the buses? And I know you're probably working on that, Dr. Gilday. So I'm just trying to kind of get my arms around that.
I'll use that contractual rate increase.
Dr. Francis?
On the bus issue, I keep needing to ask, are we doing okay with the private school buses? And do we need to consider additional expenditure to make sure that works, or is, I don't know. Sorry, the independent school buses? I know we'd had been having issues with getting the kids there on time and picking them up on time, and we promised that we were going to work on that, and I just wanted to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do for that.
We have a meeting after the New Year's meeting, which is supposed to be currently impacted by.
But we don't think there's a budget issue related to that?
Ms. Deaton?
I appreciate the good words from Dr. Francis about the operating increase, but just to represent my own point of view, I wasn't necessarily saying we should spend up to our last penny available. I was saying that we should go through the list of programs and services and identify the ones where there's a majority of board members in support of making additions to the budget. And I know it's laborious to go through item by item by item. We were able to find consensus on 3 additions in the last meeting, which was headway. But I think we're going to have to go through that in a systematic way once again. And it's up to you, Peter, which meeting you'd like to cover that in.
I think if we can do some of that in the next budget item. Dr. Gilday?
So I think what the administration would ask of the board is that we put some tiered priorities together. So basically we want to look at those in groupings rather than have you parse apart each thing, because again, it's not a wish list. These are really things that we need. It's just what is the tolerance of going up to that penny. So, and it's really not a what's your favorite kind of question. It's just these are all of the things, these are all of the many areas they cover financially in our requests. Some are staffing, some are stuff, right? But it's not really a cherry pick necessarily. It's just what can we put together that's going to make the most sense to make a budget that makes sense, right? So in our first tier, we have multiple items. In our second tier, we put that staffing. So again, that may be something that we talk about as staffing priority, which again, that has a different level of approvals and headcount and all of that, and then go into kind of those long-term things.
Ms. Rabin.
Just trying to keep to the agenda, and this is the Q&A part that we're still at.
Still, yes.
So I missed the deadline by maybe a couple of hours, and my questions were a little bit more complex to just ask you guys on the spot, but it was about the whole admin, the part-time versus full-time, and looking at like not just the benefit cost, but the cost of having, people at desks and all the equipment and things like that. A real comparison if we did consolidate down to full-time, less people full-time versus more people part-time.
Dr. Francis?
It's not a Q&A.
All right, should we move on from the Q&A or, Ms. Olson?
My question was about the cost to provide a full-time media specialist in New Lebanon. We're talking about these, right, the question and answers. I just wanted to say that because I still doesn't sit right that this one particular elementary school of all of them doesn't have a full-time media specialist at a particular school where there's more checkouts. You have something to say, Dr. Bill?
I think, and I'm going to check with Bob Stacy over there, but I think it's a media specialist assistant. I don't think it's the actual media specialist. It's the person who is the assistant. They have 17 hours. They're asking for 25, but they have the full media specialist. Am I correct on that, Bob?
It is a full-time media specialist, and it's a part-time media assistant.
Okay.
For currently, there's 17 hours. The principal is asking for her to be there for 25 hours.
Okay.
But they do have a full-time media specialist.
Okay.
And then notwithstanding the principal, I know that we heard from the PTA president who had said that there was also, there's a lot of utilization of that media center. There's a lot of kids that check out books more there than even certain other elementary schools, and that they were using a lot of parent volunteers, from what I understood. They were using...
The principal said that with a 25-hour media assistant that she would be able to meet the needs of the students in the school. Right? And it's also in the budget.
Any others on the Q&A, or should we move on? Yes, Ms. Kelly.
Sorry, just for clarification. I had asked about the old Greenwich generator, and thank you for the answer. And then I noticed somewhere, maybe we'll get into the capital plan, that it looked like it was for Riverside School, or is that an additional one? I'm just a little confused.
It's not an additional request. We had an error. It was supposed to have been for Old Greenwich and not Riverside. And I think in the subsequent year, we then recommend a generator at Riverside.
Okay, if that's it for the... Oh, Dr. Francis.
My other one wasn't a question, but this is. I'd like to better understand the impact if we do not fully support the digital tools and resources for the personalized math, what impact we envision that would have.
Right, so that basically means we might come back with a, just do one grade level, scale it, so this year, for instance, third grade is using it heavily, we might just roll it up to fourth grade next year then. So it might just slow down that adoption of that tool.
And do you guys feel like you're ready to do that if you have the funding for next year to do the bigger picture?
I do. It's a supplement. It's not the full curriculum, certainly, but the ability the teacher has to then view into how the children are progressing in the math sequence is really powerful. It's a really good model of what technology can do. So it's a good way to look at one subject area and see what it means to do some of that, supplemental work, the assessment analysis, all of that's kind of built right into that particular tool. So it just does depend how quickly we want to scale that, whether we scale that to a certain grade band, 3, 4, 5. But it is looking at, those tools are kind of replacement for what we might have spent on a book in the past or a workbook.
All right, anything else in Q&A? All right, with that, we'll move on to item B, which is the superintendent's proposed 2018-2019 operating budget. Dr. Gilday.
Okay, so we're kind of similar theme now. So then as we're looking at the full budget, the operating budget rather than the capital, if there are other questions or clarifications, we're happy to handle those, or if there are other recommendations that the board is making, this is a great time to do that, for us to capture that.
Do you want to talk through the classification of the tiers? It was in a supplemental document online. I don't know if Lori wants to walk us through that.
Or is that on capital or the operating?
Operating.
Okay, so included in your packet, you have the tiered categories of the programs and services that were recommended a couple of weeks back. The second sheet is sort of that sensitivity analysis, which shows the impact of each of the tiers on the budget that we presented. So the budget that we presented had a 2.19% increase. If we were to accept the Tier 1 programs and services, we'd be looking at a 2.4% budget increase overall. So that's the top half of that page showing before the accounting changes. I've also shared the after accounting changes as well, so you could see what that might look like. And then the schedule just goes on to show what it would look like if we adopted both tiers 1 and 2. That would bring our 2.19 budget to 3.01% of an increase. And then if we accepted all 3 tiers, we'd be at a 3.17% increase. And then it just shows also the impacts of, thereby increasing another 0.5% or another 1% on the budget, should there be specific items in a tier that we really want to consider for tonight.
Just to confirm that 2.4 is within the BET budget guidelines.
Yes, that's the overall guideline.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, discussion? Ms. Winnie?
Is this the time for a new proposal?
Sure.
Well, I was looking back and listening to people say about the changeover in administration that we have, and we're very focused on keeping superintendents. But I think in addition to keeping superintendents, I think it's important that we look at our other administrative staff. And as for my brief history on the board, you are the third person to stand before us in the last 6 years in this position, and I think there's something to be said for that, in that knowing where the people who stood there prior have gone, and the increase in staff that some of them have experienced, and increase in salary, it seems to me that this turnover is sending us a message that we need more staff in that office. Because now we're at a time like no time before in terms of the number of projects that we have. We've got Ham fields, we've got Western Middle School remediation, we got turf and lighting fields at either at a middle school or an elementary school, whatever is determined. We have lighting for Field 7 and capacities, building the bubble and so on. The number of projects goes on and on. That's in addition to the 18 sites that we have to maintain. We're now looking at a long-term facilities project, which is also going to require more manpower. And I think adding this manpower to the COO office, in the long run, to me, will mean efficiency. It will mean cost savings, because things will be able to be managed better because of the increase in manpower, rather than expecting a really short staff to be doing all the things that they're doing. So looking at the turnover in that job, the number of jobs that this position requires, because besides all these other projects, she's in charge of the positions in charge of facilities, the food service, security, grounds, whatever. Everything but the teachers you're in charge of, but it really comes down to. And I think the board should seriously consider adding staff to this office if we plan on keeping good people in the position, and if we plan on being on top of all the facilities and grounds issues that face us now. Thank you.
Ms. Deaton.
I hate to put you on the spot, but I'd love to know what would be most useful to you as a manager, honestly, what type of position, because I assume many, many hours of your time is simply spent in meetings, public hearings or town meetings, Board of Ed meetings. How do we produce fewer hours in your workload?
First of all, I just want to thank Ms. O'Neill for raising it. I really do appreciate it. I think what I've heard in my short time being here is that there really is more of a need for project planning and properly executing our projects, which to date has been a challenge. We're sort of, doing everything last minute, and it's just not the right way to run our operation. So I would love to see us taking a little bit more time to really think through our projects, come up with solid project plans, and then follow through on those plans. In terms of thinking about what we could benefit from, I would say that we absolutely need to have a project manager on staff in the facilities department. As was mentioned, we do have a number of projects, both large and small, and administratively, those projects can be quite a burden. So really having somebody on staff who is an internal employee versus being a consultant would be really helpful for us. And then in my office, again, just following through on that concept of project planning, perhaps looking at somebody who is sort of a special projects, a director position of some sort. I know I've heard director of operations, and we can certainly, I haven't thought through too much of that, but I think it would be helpful to have somebody who can help me better execute the projects that are coming to our office.
In previous districts, I've worked with a CSBO, who would be the Chief School Business Financial Officer, and then the Chief Operational Officer. So those have been divided.
So, Dr. Gilday, I know you've talked about this year with the budget being your first year keeping things moving, but that next year your thought would be to do basically analysis of the budget and really get into the weeds. Would this position help you in that, either freeing up Lori's time or being somebody that would be able to help you with that?
Yeah, it's something that would definitely, we need to work to get a lot of these projects that are priorities moving. So we do need that project manager to really help facilitate that, because if you think about Dan Watson's work, right, we've got, as you said, all the facilities to maintain with some pretty hefty workload there, plus these projects that we really need to get done, and some of them in a timely fashion, right? We need to get to that field. We need to keep moving to field remediation. So having that work, a lot of MIA, I imagine the board will be dealing with a lot of MIA applications this winter and spring to push forward these things that we need. So just getting all of those process steps done, it's tremendously time consuming.
Ms. Rabin?
So sorry, Barbara, I know you tried to call me today. I was heads down and planning for 2018 in my day job. So Lori, are you asking for 2 additional people, or the type of work could be done by 1 person? And then you also mentioned that right now consultants help with some of this work. So maybe as we see potential costs of adding this to the budget, would there be any offset savings, reduction in consulting fees?
So the first the answer to your first question would be 2 positions, both a project manager and somebody who assists with special projects would be ideal. In terms of cost savings, we estimate there could actually be some savings based on what we're actually spending in consultants today, and that would be with the benefits package. Of course, it would depend on the level that we would bring that position in.
Ms. Dayton.
If you look at the org chart on page 27 of the handout that's entitled Proposed Operating Budget, page 27, the project planner, where would that fit in the org chart? Would that position be under Director of Facilities, or would that be along the same line as that?
So the project manager would report to the Director of Facilities, Dan Watson.
And that would be an M&C, or?
Sorry, I was trying to find the page. I missed the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Page 27.
It was in the addition that we got. It's page swaps.
Oh, the organizational chart? Okay, I have it on page 156. Looks like the same chart. The information just came to my attention this afternoon. Lori and I had an initial discussion. It'll likely be an M&C position. It's not a certified position. It's a level probably above LIUNA. So it's likely that both the positions will be M&C types of positions.
Dr. Francis?
So I agree, we have a lot of projects, and just having been to the recent P&Z meeting, I think, we really need to be well organized. I think we need to think big picture, understand all of the needs, and look at each project in terms of how those things fit in there. So I completely agree that this is a place that we want to have good, dedicated effort. Before you started talking, I was thinking, short term, is that something where a consultant that's hired specifically for that might be helpful? I don't have a clear sense of whether we think we're going to have this level of burden in terms of projects long term, or whether we feel like we're finally kind of pulling things together. So whether that's a transition, as we better understand that as another way to do it. But this is new to my brain, so I'm just thinking a little bit out loud, but I think there's no doubt that we need help with this, because we want to do these things well. These are going to be big projects that are going to cost a lot of money, and to not do right by the town, do right by the students, do right by the projects, to not present them well to the town so they can understand the clear need for them, and not present a well-organized project so that they can understand how we're going to carry it out, is not going to do anybody a service. So I do think it's something we really want to make sure we do well. The difficulty is that, as we all know, there's not infinite amounts of money, so it's sort of that trade-off, because we also want to teach our students well and do other things too.
So I'll just ask the next steps, Dr. Gilday. I was thinking maybe you could pull something together as to what this position might look like, give you a little time to reflect in time for our budget meeting. And obviously, as Dr. Francis noted, we don't have an unlimited pot of money, so how are we going to balance this with the other needs?
I thought Tier 1 was a slam dunk. I guess we're going to be coming back to you on that.
If I may, just speaking from experience, to echo the board's comments, and filling in during the course of the 3 months when we had the transition period, I could clearly see the need for that. Our parallel partners at the town, I was one acting as Dan, so to speak, but there was 4 or 5 different people in parallel positions at the town that I was having to liaison with on a regular basis, which from a relationship standpoint and and a continuity standpoint. Over the long term, I could see how difficult that would be to be able to partner when you got one person partnering with 5, right? It's a huge challenge versus having that sectioned off in a different way. We do have a consultant that has been providing support during the course of the summers for the last several years who helps with the project work, but that's somebody who comes in June timeframe, helps us kind of manage projects. There's no continuity, necessarily commitment to those projects as well, so I could see where this would have extreme value there moving forward. And I think initially it's focused on, we're looking at primarily capital, but you've also got the school start time project that's ongoing. There's other projects that are going to come up that are not just capital related, that I think if you get the right person in, has the right skill set, is going to be able to add significant value in both of those particular positions.
All right. Are there other questions specifically on that as a concept? If not, I'd like to go back to the projects by tier, because I think you're going to want an indication from us. Yes, I'm getting a nod. You know, as I look at tier 1, and everybody else should feel free to chime in, I mean, those align with the things that we discussed last time. I am comfortable moving forward with those. We obviously will take a vote on the total package at our December 21st meeting. But if you're looking for input, I'm for tier 1 at this point. I don't know that we're going to be in a position to go beyond that for this year. But as you develop your budget for next year, for the following year, don't lose sight of these. Dr. Francis.
So I completely agree with tier 1. My feeling was, you know, looking some into tier 2. I'm really torn as we look at tier 2. I understand that the town does not really want us to increase headcount, but I think, you know, with the administration's guidance, I wouldn't completely rule out an increase in headcount, but I don't think we can do all of them. So I think that to me would be a place where we would need the administration to give us a sense of within that, and I know that's really hard to do, but within that, where we would go. And then, I mean, I know it's near and dear to my heart, the math pilot, but you know, actually before Mr. Dunn was here, before we went to one-on-one, the thing I stood up in front of the board and said, and I still strongly believe, is if you're going to invest in digital tools, you want to use them right. You want tools that are going to assess, that are going to help move kids forward, that are going to keep track of this information, that are going to use technology in a way that really impacts our learning, but our students' learning. And I think to take on this kind of project, to talk about personalized learning, to do digital one-on-one, but not to have the software, the ability to actually make it really do what it's supposed to do, means you're not fully utilizing the other millions of dollars that we've expended. And I think to do the pilot, to make that kind of investment, and not to spend a little bit more to really do it right, doesn't make sense to me. So I really do strongly encourage us. And, you know, I'm not saying it's necessarily the full 425. Is there some in between? I don't know, but I really strongly support that, because I think this is part of how we're really transforming education and really going behind what we're talking about in terms of personalized learning.
Thank you.
If I could, just on the headcount point, typically the town's concern on the additions of headcount is we're adding benefit packages. So just to clarify, for the tier 2 positions, the family and community engagement specialist is proposed as a part-time position, so there'd be no benefit package attached to that. The PE wellness coordinator, there's already a benefit package attached to the teacher who's doing it, so it wouldn't be the addition of a benefit package. It would just be a conversion of a teaching position to an administrative position. And the same thing with the ESL AVID coordinator. There's already a benefit package attached to the position, so it would just be merely a conversion of the position from a GEA to a GOSA position.
Just before Ms. Dayton in a second, I just want to clarify in the science research, I support Ms. O'Neill upping that to $20,000. And I should have mentioned in tier 2 the assistant deans. I'm hopeful that Mary and Chris Winters, Dr. Winters, can find money this year through Evolve or otherwise to fund those positions and put us in a position where next year we can try to work that in. All right, Ms. Dayton.
the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to try to find more efficiencies here. Again, I think if we have a forms management system, that should be a cost that's shared with the town. I really feel strongly about it because we absorb the print shop from the town. It's only fair that that cost comes down for the Board of Ed. We seem to be spending a lot in Tier 1 on automation. There's a lot on automation, a lot on process. I'm just pointing that out. I hope next year we can start directly spending on education again. The other thing is the digital tool resource. Even if it's in a future budget, I just don't think that kind of cost is sustainable. So can we look at other alternatives to spending $425,000? As we look at all academic areas, we're going to have to make it something that is year in and year out able to be absorbed into the budget.
Yes.
I'd like to just add to that, Jennifer. I completely agree with your perspective on that, especially because this is just math, as Dr. Gilday has pointed out in the past, and we're going to do this for, I assume, across all of our content. So it is important to sort of think about the long-term price of doing this. But at the same time, I also feel strongly about personalized learning from a personal perspective. So it's hard to balance it all, but it's something we should be thinking about.
Other comments, thoughts on operating? Ms. O'Neill?
I just want to clarify, the internet service provider, is that something that's new, or is that something that the town used to pay for and now we're paying for?
Good evening. It's a service we've had for years that's no longer subsidized. We've had this for years. We now have to pick up the cost of it.
Right, because the town used to pay for it.
No, it used to be subsidized significantly for us, and now the provider...
By whom?
By the state.
By the state?
By the state.
It's one of these things that we've absorbed, so...
Yes.
In my mind, that shouldn't be counted as an increase over our cap, because it's something that we now have to pay that used to be paid. So I think, at least for a transition year, you know, because some of these changes have come on us rather quickly, not since we started developing this budget back in June, July. And so we have these things that are coming upon us, and so I think there should be some wiggle room with that cap because of these sudden expenses that we have. And also this one about the videotaping, the $12,000. I don't know if we have a choice with that, do we? Because it's a new mandate. So hopefully we'll see what the town is doing and maybe we can, you know, join them and make it somewhat cheaper or whatever. But it's, again, an unfunded mandate that, in my mind, shouldn't be, in this transition year, be considered something over our cap.
That's a strong argument.
Thank you. Others on the operating budget? All right, going once, going twice. Oh, hang on.
While she's looking.
Dr. Francis.
I would say the one thing about the Tier 1 and it not being sort of educationally, I mean, one of the reasons I felt justified in supporting a lot of these things was I felt like what we had understood is by automating these things would allow the staff members who are currently doing all of these more menial tasks able to then concentrate on more productive and fruitful endeavors for our students and for education. So there's sort of that benefit. And I also assumed, although I didn't ask, that with that money going in towards the digital tools for the personalized math, that there would likely be eventually some savings from that as we moved away from other materials that we might be currently using, but that probably it's hard to completely do that in the first year, but that we would expect that to happen. And although I'm not an educator, you know, we do a lot of personalizing, is my sense, in just right level books and other kinds of things that we already do in English. And one of the reasons I really was strongly behind doing that for math is I felt like math was behind and that a lot of other places were already doing these things. So there may not be the same need to increase at that same cost level for other areas where we're already doing more personalization.
Ms. O'Neill.
You wouldn't have so many questions if Dr. Francis didn't share her computer with me. So it's all her fault. So I just wanted to clarify what I think I heard, is that with the PE Wellness Coordinator, that would not be an additional benefits package, because that's already in existence?
Correct.
Really? Okay. So we have a half person who has the benefits, whatever. Sorry, you get your exercise. But I must say, this system of having you come up there is much better than passing them the mic back and forth.
Thank you. I need the exercise.
Don't we all?
It's actually now serving as a .8 teacher release to supervise the program, and it's a .2 teaching position. So the person already has, so the .8 already has benefits. And when the position becomes 1.0 GOSA, after the board approves it, then the benefit package is
So
already
it's
attached to
just a
that, and
.2
the
then.
.2 just gets reallocated to a different PE teacher who would pick up that .2 class. If it's
And
if it's
just
still
while you're
needed.
there, that's also true of the ESL and
Correct.
ABBA coordinator? those-
Correct, the ESL ABBA coordinator is a .5 GEA, .5
So they've
GOSA.
already got the benefits pack,
Correct.
the administrator's benefits package?
Correct.
Right.
And then the teaching portion of that would just be reallocated to another teacher that's not full-time.
So the only new position in Tier 2 would be Family and Community Engagement Specialist?
And that's proposed as a part-time position,
be
so there's
part-time,
so no benefit package
No
attached to
benefits.
it.
I see. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Dayton?
Just when you thought we had everything neatly packaged up here. I appreciate that you know best what the priorities are, but if I may, I would much rather have the Innovation Lab in Tier 2 than the Classroom Technology Replacement Program in full. I would trade the Innovation Lab funding for a few less smart boards. I think digital devices are the direction the district is heading, so I don't see that as a big sacrifice, but we really do have to let Innovation Lab fully develop so we can fully evaluate it. This funding used to be provided by Greenwich Alliance, so to take the funding out of the budget, in my mind, doesn't allow us to fully evaluate what the program was intended to be. So let's get to the end of the pilot with the full funding and then see if we want to continue the program.
I've had the opportunity to visit. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So easy evaluation. I mean, they're doing incredible work. So what this proposal was for, similar to the science research course, it was to provide some of those materials and supplies above and beyond what would be typical. It's almost like a department budget. In other words, that's all that is.
So just on the classroom technology replacement, Mr. Dunn can probably add some commentary to this. We actually took that out of the budget last year, put that aside, knowing that we needed to come back to it. It is smart boards, but it's not just smart boards anymore. We're using monitors more because the students are using and creating on their devices, and they need that to display to the classroom. So I don't know if there's wiggle room in the number, but maybe Mr. Dunn can tell us.
There's always wiggle room in a number. It's about your priorities. So the only concern is we estimate you really should be budgeting about $300,000 annually to sustain the inventory that you have. So that 120,000 figure is already in the red. So if you want to go deeper into the red, that's fine. The reality is you will have $5,000 boards that are sitting unused in classrooms.
When you say unused, that's because they're not working.
Yes, that's because they have failed and we don't have the funds to repair them. We've tried to repair the older models of smart boards that have the reticulated kind of arm with it, and we can't even get parts in the secondary market anymore for many of the models that we have installed. So the proposition becomes all or nothing. We're replacing with a $5,000 approximate display panel, or we're going to TVs or monitors, as Mr. Bernstein described, where we can work with the teacher to find that to be an acceptable solution. So that 120,000 figure is already in a deficit.
Thank you. Other questions? Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to move on to capital. Dr. Gilday.
All right, same direction. If you have additional questions or clarifications, we can offer those.
Ms. O'Neill.
I should know this, but I just want a little clarification on the central field. If we turf the whole area, how many fields do we get? Do we get a field and a half, 2 fields? What do we get?
Turfing central field, so it's actually quite larger. I think we have a softball field there, a baseball field, and current drawings that we have to date sort of show us that we could place the football field somewhere in the middle. If we were to turf the whole thing, would that effectively get us 3 spaces? I don't know if that's the right way to put it.
The issue is if you put a football field or a soccer field, whatever the turf field is, just in the middle of the field and not turf the rest of it, you're essentially losing the 2 baseball fields on either side. You could put a turf field, but you've got boundaries associated with it, concrete curbing or things like that, underground structures for drainage or whatever. So you could put a turf field in the middle of that field, but you, in essence, would be losing the other 2 fields. I'm sorry? You would be losing the outfields, yes.
So, no, I'm not trying to chop it up in any way. I just want to know what the price, what the $5 million was going to get us. So it could get us a soccer or a football field and a baseball field?
In essence, if we did the entire field, you would have 2 full fields, a softball field, a soccer field, and you'd have a large outfield that could be lined and used as football, soccer, lacrosse, whatever. So it's how the fields are used.
Sounds like a bargain.
So having spent
Dr. Francis.
Sorry, having spent a lot of time out there with various children, my sense is you can't have 3 fields functioning at the same time necessarily, but ultimately you'd have 3 different usable fields, right? That maybe you could have 2 at the same time or 1 or 2, but you'd have functioning for lots of different things.
Hang on. So I've heard at various points that the town has had plans or at least interest in turfing the middle school fields. Have you been able to get to the bottom of that at all?
Yes, we have a meeting with the Parks Department this week about it. They have a feasibility study that they're just entering into. They've started it already with an architectural firm.
And do they have a specific field in mind, or are they looking at across all 3 middle schools?
They're looking at all 3, but their focal point is Central.
Ms. Rabin.
I was going to ask the same question. And then the other, I think I read somewhere there might be a cost savings if we used a different material to turf. And I think we already had that conversation, again, my favorite word, ad nauseum, about what type of material that we would use to turf. So I don't think that we should be talking about cost savings. We know what material I think that we need.
Ms. Dayton.
I'd like to be optimistic that we can get Central Middle School fields operational and have Field 7 with a bubble, but I'm not optimistic about passing all of our capital projects through the BET, and I'm wondering about the $5 million cost of the bubble on Field 7 as a priority versus the Central Middle School turfing and lighting. And I also wonder, realistically, as we proceed with the neighbors of the high school, will we even be able to expend the money and use the facility in the coming fall season at Greenwich High School if we have a bubble there? I would hate to put the money in the budget if we can't actually use Field 7 with the bubble, because it's a trade-off for us, and we want to get our budget passed. So if anyone in the administration would like to comment on the use of Central versus the use of Field 7. That would be helpful.
Just wanted to clarify that the bubble, the way we have it recommended at this stage, is that it would happen in FY20. For FY19, we planned for turfing at a middle school. And the reason being is that there certainly is, again, going back to this whole project planning, we really do need to take the time to really think through what needs to be involved in each, along the path to getting to where we would like to be. We've talked a little bit about the bubble and what would be required for that to actually, come to fruition, and it would actually involve some sort of, some sort of foundation to have it installed, and whether it's temporary or permanent. So there's still some more work that would need to be done to really understand the true impacts of that project. So we have that slated for FY20.
Dr. Francis?
So I was going through the new CIP priorities that comes down to about 15 million. What is the difference between that and the 20 that we had originally? I didn't get a chance to really look through it line by line, so I wasn't sure if it was a couple major things, lots of little things, and what we feel about that difference in what we're giving up.
Yeah, we might just be missing the field in this number, the 5 million. Not sure why it dropped off. Okay, so it's the fields that, I'm sorry, it's the turfing, the $5 million that's missing from the schedule.
But we're not giving that up.
We are not. It was an oversight. Yeah, we'll go back and reconcile. Something dropped off.
Ms. Olson.
So just to clarify, we're looking at FY19 turfing a field, and that field looks like is leaning towards Central Middle School, yes? I would just ask going forward that we remain cognizant of all neighbors as well.
Absolutely.
Of the middle schools.
And I guess I'm curious, Dan, because I know you're meeting with P&Z, who's doing their own feasibility study on a property that we own. Do they also happen to be planning to fund a portion of that program?
I don't know.
So we'll continue our partnership with the town on all things fields.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Yes, Ms. Stowe.
I think at one point I had asked a question about Western Middle School, and it was about remediation. Sorry, it wasn't about the field. I guess that's kind of going back to the operating budget, but is that something we should be considering as well in our plan somewhere?
Is your question specifically about the budget for Western remediation? Right, so we're still trying to determine what that impact might be. We weren't in a position to make a request to modify that budget at this time, since we just don't know what those numbers will look like. We'll have to come back to you when we have more information on that.
So just a follow-up on that. So the high school remediation has been carried on the town side. Is there any reason why the Western remediation wouldn't also be carried on the town side?
Right, so I asked that same question. My understanding was it was a matter of resources. But we are partnering with DPW and the town to make sure that we've aligned our processes. We're doing similar things on both ends.
Other questions? Ms. Deaton.
I'd like to push back on that, and I'd like to reopen negotiations with the town on who funds Western Middle School remediation. We should be focused on education expenses. That's our role. And I think we need a consistent way to handle remediation as a town of Greenwich. And it doesn't make sense to split it up into different projects in different pockets of the same organization. So who would like to take that challenge, Mr. Bernstein?
Anybody else? All right, other questions, comments? Dr. Francis, I'm just giving you the last chance. It's the last one. All right, well, with that, we will close the questions. Kim, when is our last round of questions due to be submitted?
Our rounds we included this year were an initial round and the final round, which we've received your questions on those. At this point, my understanding is that we were looking to take some feedback from this discussion, bring that all together for a recommendation on the budget on the 21st.
Okay. And I know Ms. Ribbon had some questions that she submitted tardy. Would we be able to answer those possibly in writing and just circulate that to the board and post that on the website?
I think it's just one question. I've already circulated that too.
Okay. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn? No, I'm begging you. Jennifer, can we get a second? Oh, hang on.
Do you guys feel like we've given you the feedback that you need, administration? Because you said you were hoping to hear feedback. I would give a little bit more feedback on tier 2, which is, sorry. Oh wait, I have. Now understanding there's no benefits packages, I'm a little less concerned about the tier 2 additional staffing. I think I had actually heard that before and I forgot, I'm sorry. And I am struggling with the assistant deans. It does sound like a very valuable thing. I find it a little bit difficult to be sort of in this position of something happened, we didn't know about it, and now, you know, we kind of have to upkeep it, particularly when it's an increase. So I find that a little difficult, and I think I've been pretty clear about how I feel about the personalized math.
So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Ms. Dayton? Still have it? Second? Dr. Francis, all those in favor? 7-0, we're adjourned. Thank you.